Morning.
Yeah.
Norm, are you still painting?
Yes, I'm still painting, and I've been doing some writing this winter, so I sort of split my energy. I've only done 3 paintings this winter. I normally aim for about 8, and the winter's not over yet. If you look outside, you can see that.
Yes.
You don't have to be in Texas either. You can be in West Virginia, and you can see the winter is still here.
I'm glad I'm here and not there. Snow is not anything that I miss, just my friends.
How are sales going?
He asked how sales are going.
Oh,
How are your sales going for you?
not too bad, but not great. It's been very difficult to promote a book during the pandemic. You can't go out and do presentations. So very thankful to have events like this where you can talk with people, about the book, because otherwise this is all we've got. This is it.
Mhm. Well, it looks like we have a lovely crowd. It's 7:02, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Francene Kirk, and I am the interim director of the Frank and Jane Gabor West Virginia Folklife Center on the campus of Fairmont State University. And several of my students are here with us tonight, and my colleague Tiffany, who works with me at the Folklife Center. And we are thrilled, and I do mean thrilled, to have Donna Meredith with us this evening for a variety of reasons. But the big one is she's a Fairmont State grad. Yay! So that's our biggest exciting reason. But also because she is a marvelous author. Donna, who is a Clarksburg native, is the associate editor of Southern Literary Review. Her award-winning novels include The Glass Madonna, The Color of Lies, Wet Work and Fraccidental Death. She also wrote Magic in the Mountains, Kelsey Murphy, Robert Baumkamp, and the West Virginia Cameo Glass Revolution. Donna graduated from Fairmont State, from West Virginia University, and from Nova Southeastern University, and studied creative writing at Florida State. We are particularly glad that she's here with us tonight as part of the Phyllis Moore author series, online author series, as we explore labor and the working folk of West Virginia. So if everyone will please mute your microphone. We do have a chat function. If you look down at the bottom and scroll across, there are 3 little dots. No, wait, that's not right. Go to the right. There's a chat function. And the reason that that is important is later when Donna takes questions, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can put your questions in the chat and I will monitor the chat. And I also will put Donna's, is that okay, Donna, if I put your email address in the chat?
Oh, sure.
I'll put Donna's email in the chat as well as her website. So if everyone could mute themselves. And Donna, and if everybody will go to the layout at the top on the right, and if you see the layout, there's one that's called Focus, and you should be able to hopefully get Donna in a big picture as opposed to a small picture. And Donna, I am going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Fran. I appreciate you all inviting me to be part of the Phyllis Wilson Moore author series. Happy to do anything with West Virginia, of course, since I spent the first 30 years of my life there. And I'm going to start off this evening with a lame joke. It's a knock-knock joke, but it illustrates that the fight for women isn't over yet. Knock, knock. Who's there? Annie. Annie who? Anything you can do, I can do for 87 cents on the dollar. And our fight is still not over to achieve equality for women. And it's one of the reasons that I like to include women as the main focus of my story. All of my books feature strong working women. The protagonist in the first book, The Glass Madonna, is a woman coming of age in the early 70s who wants to be a glass blower. But the unions at that time would not allow women to work with hot glass. They could pack the glasses after they were already made and things like that, but they were kept off the factory floor with the high-paying jobs. And the second book, Magic in the Mountains, is the true story of a woman who carved cameo glass in some of West Virginia's factories, including Pilgrim, Blenko, and Fenton, names that if you're a glass lover, you're familiar with, I'm sure. The third book, The Color of Lies, featured a teacher who deals with race issues in a small southern town. The next two novels were environmental thrillers featuring a female hydrogeologist, and I had to learn all about hydrogeology for that one. And the latest book, Buried Seeds, has two strong activists as my protagonists. The present day activist is Angie Fisher. She's a 50-year-old science teacher. And like most modern women, she is juggling a full slate of problems. She has a challenging job that doesn't pay enough. Her granddaughter Bella is born with hearing deficits, and her stepfather is struggling with dementia. This excerpt that I'm going to read first is from the first chapter of the novel, and it lays out another conflict that comes up and is very important to the story of a working woman. It takes place in Clarksburg in August of 2017. Sweat soaks my pillowcase, the air heavy with the humidity of late summer and the lingering odor of the salmon I sauteed for supper. I glance at the red LED readout on my clock, 11:15. Half an hour I've been lying awake. I roll onto my back, close my eyes. Deliberately, I begin to count my blessings, picturing each family member and friend, a relaxation technique to forget my worries, to forget the heat. At last, I feel myself adrift in the sweet forgetfulness of sleep. The light on dewy side of the bed flares on the visual equivalent of a screeching fire alarm. He thrusts his body upright with an obnoxious whoomp that rocks the mattress and scares the freaking daylights out of me. What's wrong? I ask. Angie, I gotta tell you something. I didn't want to, but it's better if you hear it from me. The blood drains from my head and shivers race along my body, now cold against the damp sheets. Is he about to confess he's cheating on me, or he wants a divorce? These prospects skirl through the fish odor and curdle my stomach. There's rumors going around. He pauses and I sit up. The wife is always the last to know. Just spit it out, Dewey. I heard Dynamo Deals is shutting down almost 100 stores nationwide. Ours is one. The tension melts away. He isn't leaving me. But by the time I wiggle my toes and think about what he's done, my muscles tense up tight as a double fisherman's knot. He could have told me when he got home from work or after dinner, but no, he waits until I'm asleep. I make an effort to suppress anger, to be sympathetic. Obviously, he's been lying there on the other side of the bed, stewing over this news, and no wonder. Geez, dude, that sucks. I dig my finger into the spot where his cervical spine ends and massage my way down the center of his back. What rotten luck. The third company he's worked for in the last decade that's folded. Was he agitated throughout dinner? I can't remember looking at his face. Not even once. Since he came home from work, I was preoccupied first with fixing the rice, the fish, the salad, the washing of the dishes, and finally wrapping up paperwork on a grant I'd received to take students on a summer field trip. I hadn't paid attention to him at all. Yeah, I shrug off my guilt. When I first started painting red highlights in my hair, it took a week before he noticed. And then only because my mother asked him if he liked having a redhead for a wife. Chalk it up to decades of marriage. If you just start to take each other for granted the way you do your favorite chair or gravity. We'll make do, I tell him. But really, how will we pay our bills on my measly teacher salary? I've never aimed to be rich, yet somehow I thought our finances would be more secure by the time I neared 50. Some folks are movers and some are shakers. If you want to change the world, you have to leap off the couch, take a deep breath, and boldly charge into the den of power. In other words, become a mover and a shaker, which is different than either one by themselves. The only thing Dewey ever shook up was a beer can once as a joke when we were camping with friends. When the bubbles erupted, he laughed. Ha! Look, Ange, West Virginia champagne. I can hardly criticize Dewey for putting himself out there. I'd rather eat live toads than stand in the spotlight. He's just the same. I hunker down inside my comfort zone less than 10 miles away from the 30-acre farm where I grew up. Home is Clarksburg in West by God, Virginia. I have a taproot like a carrot or beet. I wouldn't transplant well. And that's the end of the first segment. After Dewey loses his job, Angie gets drawn into the fight for higher wages and better health care for teachers. She's always been reluctant to assume leadership roles, leaving all those kinds of things up to her sister, Mackenzie, who is Miss President of everything. And Angie is adopted, and she feels a little bit inferior to Mackenzie because she's a naturally born child in the family. But Angie's best friend is president of the teachers union and talks her into serving as vice president. Angie's mother encourages her to accept, and she tells her that she will be following in the footsteps of a very famous ancestor in her birth family, Rosella Krause. Rosella was a potter involved in women's suffrage in the early 1900s. And as Angie learns about Rosella's bravery, she finally agrees to serve as vice president of the union. And then, wouldn't you know it, her best friend becomes sick and she is thrust into the role of president right out front and center, doing something she really doesn't want to do. And it causes tremendous tension with her husband, Dewey, because he's trying to get a job with the FBI, which is located in nearby Bridgeport, West Virginia. And he doesn't want his wife looking like a troublemaker and lawbreaker on the evening news. I actually wrote a partial draft of the Rosella story 8 years ago, and I stowed it away. I didn't know where I wanted it to go. I had done tons of research, so I knew I didn't want to get rid of it altogether. I had researched both West Virginia during that time period and also San Francisco. I had moved Ro from Clarksburg to San Francisco because I wanted her to learn to make pottery at a sanitarium for TB patients. And a lot of the women in San Francisco got TB after the 1906 earthquake. And they opened up this great sanatorium there that worked with women to make pottery. And it's very collectible. So I got her out there, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with her after that. Then when the West Virginia teachers went on strike in 2018, I knew I'd found the modern component to my story because I had walked out with the teachers back in the early 1970s. It wasn't nearly as organized as what they did in 1918, but we kind of took days that were blue days. A bunch of us would go down to Charleston for the day and protest, and we did get some changes made that year, more funding for the schools and a little bit of a raise. So my heart was really with the teachers when they walked out in 2018. I invented Angie Fisher, and I beefed up the activism aspects of the early part of the novel as well, the story of Ro. And it worked out very well because women actually got the right to vote in the Western states earlier than they did in the rest of the country, a decade or more early. So I was able to, and Susan B. Anthony was out there and they had marches and it was all very successful. California got the right in 1910. So I was able to put Ro in the middle of that. Rosella is born into a world where women went from being controlled by their husbands, or by their fathers, I mean, to being controlled by their husbands. And Susan B. Anthony never married because she refused to give up the right of self-determination. We often talk about suffrage in terms of the right to vote, but it was so much more than that. We don't talk as often about the right to work and the right to control our own money. And husbands had control of wives' money. So if you wanted control over your own life, you couldn't be married, or you really had to make sure you were married to a man that was going to treat you right. Ro has to hide the fact that she's selling her artwork from her husband, and she hides her income from him. And I'm going to read you a small part of her story. As it opens, Ro and her 14-year-old daughter, Selena, have traveled by train from Clarksburg to San Francisco, where an old friend who inherited an art gallery has arranged to show Ro's pottery. And this is in 1920, after women do have the right to vote, in California anyway. And this is Rosella's voice. The teacup slipped from my fingers and clattered onto its saucer. It seemed some ghost from my past refused to stay buried. I scanned the headline again and let my breath hiss past my teeth. How in tarnation could the Examiner print such garrulous lies? Now that the Great War was over, it seemed all the newspapers wanted to print was scandal and gossip and lies. I scanned the first paragraph again, hoping the words were merely the product of a mind still cobwebbed by dreams or nightmares. But the massive headline, so oppressively dark in typeface and thought, assaulted me anew. As if my hands possessed no more substance than empty gloves, bereft of starch and bone, they release the Examiner, its pages spilling atop buttered toast, a pot of fragrant plum jam, and what remained of my chamomile tea. I would have appreciated this room service more had it not included the newspaper. My hands flew to the hollow at the base of my throat as if to shield that most vulnerable stretch of skin. Were authorities about to arrest me, imprison me, hang me by the neck until dead? Considering the power of the puritanical crusade waged by Compton and his ilk, it is no wonder that I was first overcome with fear. But let me assure you, after a few deep breaths, outrage replaced fear. Oh, all right, I was afraid too. But the ridiculousness of that headline, lock her up. Yes, the paper deemed me, all 92 pounds, fully dressed out in petticoats, corset, and leather shoes. Me worthy of 3 exclamation marks. 3! Why, the very morality of the nation must be at stake. Gasp! What woman's husband could possibly be safe as long as such a harlot remained free? Lock her up! Oh, I had spent a night in jail when I was arrested for picketing at the White House, but other women shared the same fate then. Awful as it was, I had misery in my company. Weevils who were kicked and beaten, manacled to the bars of prison cells, and denied even the simple luxury of a toothbrush. That last bothered me more than anything else. I do like clean teeth. This new threat singled me out in a personal attack. Who among my acquaintances had fed the reporter this mishmash of fact and fiction? Hardly anyone knew the few details that were accurate. Who would betray me this way? I had barely noticed when Selena rose from the breakfast table and tiptoed behind me to see what had caused such alarm. By the time she spoke, I suppose she had already read most of the story over my shoulder. Mama, I know you are different from other mothers, but how can they say these things about you? Different? I wasn't that different. Although I grant you, most mothers didn't have clay under their fingernails, and not many had arrest records. But it wasn't as if I had committed any criminal acts. None I deemed criminal anyway. I caressed the petal-smooth hand she placed on my shoulder without turning to look at her. When I didn't respond, the hand on my shoulder tightened, her tone more insistent, the pitch higher, trembling. Mama! She was so young, only 14, and innocent, but I could procrastinate no longer. Even though I had rehearsed my story mentally over the years, now that the moment had arrived, I felt unprepared. Only a fool could believe I set out to become a bigamist, I said. And I know you are no fool, Selena, because I raised you. Most certainly, I am not now, nor have I ever been a baby killer or a whore. You cannot believe these things about me. Such despicable fabrication is beneath even Hearst and the Examiner. Oh, but I shuddered as I considered the damage this would do. Picture my fine circle of patrons and friends as their eyes alight on this sordid gossip. See their finely embroidered handkerchiefs clasped to the delicate pink of their lips. Hear them call their maids for smelling salts. But quicker than my friends can order up a carriage, they will be overcome by a Christian impulse to share such dreadful news. Feel the air shift as front doors whiz open and click shut along Russian Hill as these ladies hurry to each other's houses. Beware, a 92-pound Satan has darkened your doorways. An exorcism is in order, or at least a glass of sherry. For a moment, I speculated about the fate of my pottery. Would they destroy my precious art, now view it as tarnished by the wicked hands that created it? No, 'tis more likely notoriety would increase its value. Every piece an opportunity to waft a pale, smooth hand in a ewer's direction and declare, I knew the artist. And then in the lowest of whispers, lean in closer, ladies. Here comes a tale of two men in two cities. A tale far racier than anything Dickens ever wrote, though hardly as profound. My story, the real story, Selena, begins on our family farm in West Virginia. Mama, I have a right to know, is Papa really? I posed the rude question before she could finish. Really your father? He raised you, didn't he? He deserves that title. But if you consider simple biology, the answer is rather more complicated. My daughter's eyes grew wide with horror. Mama, right now I feel as if I have no idea who you are. Don't be ridiculous. Let me assure you, the story I am about to share will vindicate my actions. I should have told her long ago, but the moment never seemed quite right. She deserved to hear the truth, a virtue entirely, well, almost entirely, absent from the Examiner story. Seriously, darling, what woman would willingly assume the responsibility of caring for two husbands simultaneously? The good Lord knows one man can be trouble enough. Especially if one of them was Jack Joyner. A considerable part of Rose's story shows how confining women's roles were before suffrage and how she joins the successful movement in San Francisco. And I had a good time doing the research. I've read lots of books, studied lots of photographs of the earthquake, found video of San Francisco back during that time period. That one surprised me. I wasn't even thinking that I would be able to find moving pictures where you could see what the streets actually looked like when they were busy. And finally, I'd like to read a small portion from the teacher strike section of the story. Angie has stepped up to the plate and led her local union, taking a group of them to Charleston with her. Her sister Mac comes along as well. And I tried to capture the excitement of being in that crowd on the Capitol grounds. I enjoyed watching the news coverage of it and seeing how the strike spread all the way across the country. I was thrilled to see that. And I do want to give credit also to a book, collection of essays written by teachers about their experiences. It was called 50 Strong. And it's an excellent look at what the teachers went through trying to get better wages and better health care. And this is the last section I'm going to read this evening. As we near the big dome, we hear, "We're not going to take it." The crowd is ginormous, a scientific term meaning who the heck knows how big. Maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000 teachers there already. It is about 48 degrees, maybe 50, I judge. Nevertheless, I keep on my gloves. My hands and feet are always cold these days, while the rest of my body bakes. My internal thermostat is broken. We encounter a sea of red at the Capitol lawn and join a red wave flowing across the grounds. Everywhere there are signs. I have to laugh when I spot a young teacher standing on one of the huge decorative posts in front of the building. I bet she is a biology teacher like me because she's holding a sign about seeds too. I am so proud of us, proud to be part of this moment. Our numbers are growing and so is our strength and vocal power. Those Weasley legislators have to take notice of us now. My sister takes a photo of my crew of 4 with another teacher who is decked out in an Uncle Sam outfit. He says the costume is symbolic of justice and unity and our fight for our country's children, for their education. I wander through the crowd and am suddenly confronted by another symbol of justice. A statue of Lincoln towers over us. Staring up at his craggy face, I seize my sister's hand. I feel crushed by the weight of history here, I say. Her brow crinkles as if she is amused. Well, it is impressive. I guess if you live in Charleston, you take all the grandeur for granted. We cheer along with another teacher who mounts the Capitol steps to lead us in chants. Almost every car driving by honks support. Mac and I chat with a woman in a knitted cap who is passing out cups of coffee. I recognize you, she says to my sister. You're in the newspaper all the time. I just live up the street from here, she says to my sister. My sister accepts a cup of coffee, beaming at the recognition. I'm here today with my sister. Mac inclines her head toward me. She's a teacher. When the woman nods, the funny knitted braids dangling from the sides of her cap nod with her. My mother was a teacher too, she says, so I know how hard your job is. Well, thanks for coming out here this morning, I say, and you aren't lying about how hard it is. A couple of police officers stop their cruiser and get out. I grab my sister's arm, adrenaline flowing. If they arrest me, Dewey will never forgive me. I am ready to run. But then they smile and drop off a few more boxes of pastries to the ladies distributing food. I relax. Police officers and state workers aren't allowed to strike with us or they will lose their jobs, but they will benefit from better insurance if our efforts succeed. Look at those kids, aren't they cute? Mac points at a pair of grade schoolers carrying their own signs. This is my homework. And We stand with our teachers. This is like a civics field trip for them, Seth says. Look over there. He motions toward a United Mine worker wearing a union jacket. And a teamster shakes my hand. In his other hand, he carries a sign declaring solidarity with us. These union workers know strikes like penguins know ice and whales know water, Seth says. But not everyone approves of us. A passenger in one passing car rolls down the window and screeches, "If you cared about the children, you'd be in the classroom." "Wrong," Mrs. Carstairs yells, not caring that the passenger can't hear her. "We care that teachers are leaving the state because they can't live on their paychecks or afford their medical insurance." She's right. More than 700 teaching positions sit vacant, and over a third of the state's math teachers are uncertified. We care that every child receives quality instruction from qualified teachers in well-funded public schools. I am doing this for my granddaughter Bella and every other child deserving of a chance at a good life. Near lunchtime, more locals show up with bottles of hot soup, bags of pepperoni rolls, and boxes of pizza. The afternoon drags on endlessly, the excitement wearing off. I say, I worry we aren't accomplishing much. But Seth reminds us, we're in it for the long haul. The longer we're out, the more pressure it puts on our legislators to act. Mrs. Carstairs stomps her feet to stay warm. You can bet parents will pressure them. It's a major incentive when these kiddies are their responsibility all day instead of ours. And I had fun creating a conflict, a fictional twist, where Angie has to decide how far will she go to achieve her goals in the strike. Her brother-in-law, Ted McNeil, better known as Ted McSteel because he's very unethical, he has an opportunity to talk with her, and she knows things that she could hold over his head. And I had an awful lot of fun creating that ethical dilemma for her to see how far she will push her own ethics to reach her goal. Will she stoop to his level or decide to stay above the fray a little bit? West Virginia has a long history of activism with minor strikes, glass unions, and now teacher strikes. Our country also has a long history of activism, and many involve social justice movements like temperance movements, women's suffrage, civil rights, and more recently, the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter. A movement is a chorus of many voices that becomes hard to ignore. But every movement starts with one voice, one activist, one person who wants to make a difference. And I'm thankful for all the people who get out there and march and protest and try to make a difference. And my main way of trying to make a difference is by writing novels that all have some kind of social issue in their heart. Thanks for inviting me, and I will take questions if anybody has any. Thanks.
Thanks, Donna.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Donna. If you have questions, and you can put questions in the chat If you can't find the chat, go down to the right of your screen. You'll see a little thought bubble. So, Donna, I guess I'm going to start. So you said that you were involved with the striking in the 70s. So did you start as a teacher?
Oh, yes, I was teaching at Grafton High School, and that was for 4 years, and then Washington Irving High School in Clarksburg for the next 6, and finished up the teaching part of my career down in South Georgia at Thomasville High School. And I have had a few other jobs as well, like being information officer for the State Attorney General's office here in Tallahassee. But mostly teaching for the large part of my career, something that my professors at Fairmont State set me on the road to do and feel pretty successful at. I had wonderful professors there. And Jane Dumeyer, who was just fabulous for journalism.
So I take it that then you, okay, somebody's asking me, Susan is asking, tell us about your title, Buried Seeds.
The title comes from a poem. And I know that it actually has other sources as well. But the lines of the poem are, "What didn't you do to bury me, but you forgot that I was a seed?" So no matter how much dirt you throw on top of a seed, that's not necessarily going to kill it. It actually might just make it grow stronger. And that is why so many labor movements have adopted that particular saying. It's and I don't know if I can say his name correctly, Dinos Christianopoulos, I believe is the poet's name. And I used it in the epigraph in the front of the book. But there are a lot of other sources for that saying as well. And it was on a teacher sign. I saw it in one of the photographs in 55 Strong. And since my teacher was a science teacher, I just knew that she was going to love that saying.
It's a great title. I mean, now that I know I thought it was related to the generations, because that's what it really intrigued me about the book was the generations.
And it does have all of those implications as well. The seeds planted by Rosella grow in Angie and give her confidence and activism. And then, of course, had I been able to do book signings and events, if I had done my book launch the way I usually do, I would have passed out seeds of black-seeded Simpson, one of my favorite lettuces to grow, because that's something that I worked into the plot as well, where Angie uses the seeds and the kids do all kind of experiments on them. A science teacher here in Tallahassee helped me with what I needed to do with the science aspects of it so that I met the state standards, because every state has slightly different standards, but she got me in touch with what West Virginia's standards were. And the kids do have to do a whole lot of online, get your hands into the actual dirt, so to speak. They really have to get more involved. It's not sit down with the textbook anymore.
Huh. Well, it's fascinating. The other thing that I wondered about was that whole sanatorium. Oh, that was so interesting out in, it's north of Los Angeles. It was north of.
Yes. Yes, it's in
Or San Francisco, sorry.
north of San Francisco.
Yeah.
My husband and I collect pottery. We don't have any Arequipa pottery. It's out of our price range. because it is one of a kind. You know, all of the pottery they made was individually decorated by the TB patients. And it was part of that arts and craft movement that was popular in the country in that time period. And a number of doctors used it. They thought it was healthy for a person to work with their hands. And of course, the whole fresh air thing, you know, where they had the open screens there, was very important part of recovery. And I got interested in the tuberculosis and the syphilis and the childbirth deaths because I attended a symposium at Fairmont State. It was sponsored by Fairmont State at the Knott House here locally. And some doctors came in and talked about women's health issues and how they had changed over the years. And those were the big ways that women were ill and died back then. And I knew that I wanted to try to work each of those into the story. So Rosella's mother passes away in childbirth, and Rosella contracts syphilis, and all of that stuff about Anthony Compton was true. Women were not allowed to learn, or they weren't supposed to. Some doctors broke that, I am absolutely sure. But it was against the law and didn't come off the books till like the 1950s, that women you couldn't disseminate information on birth control. And it was against the law to really talk about STDs. So it's no wonder they were as prevalent as they were. It was gossip. You know, look at what Rose's husband believed. If you have read the book, and I won't give it all away because you may not have, but, you know,
Incredible.
when they didn't have access to accurate medical information, then you just latch on to whatever little gossip and rumor is going around.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Oh,
Louise, I think you're on mute.
okay.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, I haven't read your book yet, Donna, but I will be very soon. And I was a little late coming in, so I don't know the time period that your book takes place in. Is it the 70s?
Two different time periods. The earliest time period is the early 1900s, when during women's suffrage.
Okay.
And 2017 is the present day period that begins and ends the story.
So the strike takes place in
2018.
Oh my, really? My very first year of teaching in Michigan, the teachers union was on strike. So I never got to the classroom for a week because all the teachers were, they had very strong union there.
Right.
And anyway, I couldn't help but identify a little bit with what you were describing. But
it's a pretty heady thing to be part of a movement like that, you know, with all those people around supporting the same cause.
yes, yes. Great. I'm so glad that you're doing this. Thank you.
Donna, I have read your books, and maybe for the others who are watching, do you want to tell us again where they can be purchased?
Well, Amazon is always the safe bet. And it is still on sale today, last day of the sale, 99 cents on Kindle and $12 for the print version. It's on sale because Susan B. Anthony's birthday was yesterday. And I do use her in the book quite a bit and got to visit her birthplace in New York State last summer, part of the research for the book. And so I had a lot of reasons for having a 3-day sale. This event was one of them. I decided to extend it to today as well because of that. So Amazon's the safest bet. You never know where else. I mean, you can order it other places, like you can ask a bookstore to get a copy, and it is available through the Ingram's distributor, which can get a book, out to any bookstore. But a bookstore won't just carry a book unless you ask for it, unless it's, a famous best-selling author, which unfortunately I am not. Norman, for those of you who don't know, is also a writer. He worked for the Dominion Post for many, many years and is also the author of several novels, including Cheat Lake. Did I get that one right? It's very good if I remember the title right.
The title is Cheat.
Cheat, okay.
About the river. I got to make that clear. It's not about cheating. It's about the Cheat River.
Right.
And you also have helped with one that I have not yet published, and I haven't given up on it yet. I want you to know that. So thank you for your help on that.
Always.
I have a question, Donna.
Yes.
This book has so much research in it. You researched, you had to keep track of what was going on in the teacher strike. You had to look into life in the sanatorium, in the arts and crafts movement. How did you keep all this information straight? Do you have a system?
Well, I do take notes, but because I worked on different parts at different times, it wasn't too difficult to keep it straight. And I did buy all the books that I used for research. So if I wasn't sure I had something right, I could go back to the source. Till I was an author myself, I got a lot of books out of the library and so forth. But now I pretty much buy all of them just to support my fellow authors.
You know what goes into it.
Yeah, I do. And I know how hard it is. But I do also get some, I get a lot of books given to me because of Southern Literary Review. I'll get review copies because I do write a lot of reviews. If you look on my website, there's under clips and reviews, there's hundreds of books that I've published reviews of in Southern Literary Review and the Tallahassee Democrat and other newspapers.
I have another
To
question.
fellow authors.
When you start a book, do you know where it's going to go, or sometimes does it occur to you? Does it emerge in the process?
I start with an outline and then I almost always end up changing it as I go along. Sometimes things just don't seem right for the characters. Once I get to know them better, they start to surprise me in the way they develop in some way, or I read voraciously, so I will run across an idea that I just think has to go into a book. This one was one of the hardest ones, and I put it aside for longer than I ever had any other manuscript, just because I didn't know what I wanted to do with Rosella. It was similar in some ways to the Glass Madonna because, we had a woman creating glass and now we had a woman creating pottery. And I think women and men do have a strong instinct to create something. to, even if it's a great meal or if it's an Afghan or whatever, you know, there's just that urge to create something that you've made with your hands. And so I had that similarity, but I didn't want the two stories to have exactly the same plot line. You know, where, okay, the woman marries a man that's not right for her, and then she breaks up with him, and, you know, it just seemed too similar. So I wanted Rose's story to come out completely different, and I think it did. And I knew I wanted her to go back to West Virginia in the end.
I have another question. So, when you started writing about the discrimination against Italian Americans in West Virginia, sort of the attitude toward them, I've been looking at that lately through books about Italian Americans. Is this something you grew up knowing about? How did you come up with that? How did you dig for that information and make that work? Was growing up in Clarksburg, was this just something you were aware of?
Yes and no. Yes, I did know that there were occasional slurs that I would hear, but I can thank Norm Julian largely for that, because he made me very much aware of things that I didn't know growing up, the things that I included in that story. For example, Staley Pool did not allow Italian Americans. I had no idea growing up that that was the case. And that neighborhoods were deeded so that they couldn't be sold to Italian Americans. No idea. I had heard slurs before, but it was partly Norm telling me about those things that just appalled me about my hometown, and I just ended up putting it in the story. Of course, I knew that there was a large Italian American population there. I mean, I grew up eating pizza even before there was such a thing as Pizza Hut or, you know, anything like that. My grandparents had gone to New York City and came back raving about pizza, and I learned to make it at home, and that was the first pizza I had. Mom made them in pie pans, those little aluminum pie pans you would get. And, you know, of course, everybody that grows up in Clarksburg knows about the great Italian restaurants. I mean, Menards and Barrios and Giulio's, and if you're in Fairmont, it was anyway, Colasesano's. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, I certainly knew a little bit about it. And I was aware that neighborhoods tended to be somewhat different. Didn't know why, though, growing up.
Other questions for Donna about process, about the novel, about her other work?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Joan, you put yourself on mute.
Unmuted. Hello? Are you?
Oh, you're there now.
Am I there?
You are.
You went to Seneca Falls and went to the Suffragette Museum, did you?
Yes, I went, actually, her birthplace, Seneca Falls, is where they had that convention, but her birthplace was in the Rochester area, and her house is now like a museum, and I had my picture taken right beside her. One of those silly cardboard cutouts. I had to have my husband take my picture there. But our RV actually developed a terrible problem when we were at Stonewall Jackson State Park. We had stayed there in the RV, and John managed to back it over a concrete barrier and broke our jacks. And we had to find somewhere to fix it. And we had planned to go to New York State. And it just turned out that the only place that could fix our RV, there was no place in West Virginia that could see us or Pennsylvania. It was going to take a month or so. We didn't want to sit there and wait that long. So it turned out Rochester had the place that could get us in and out, fix them just like that. And I could spend the whole day fooling around in Rochester and visit that museum and watch videos of her life. And she just was such an amazing person that she devoted all of her life to it. Elizabeth Cady Stanton came up with a lot of the ideas, but she was married with children and she couldn't go traipsing off all over the country. So it was Susan B. Anthony who did a lot of the traveling and protesting. So we all owe her quite a debt for her devotion to the cause. Yes, Joan? You're muted again.
Am I here?
Yes, now you're there.
All right. I worked at a Tompkins County Hospital in Ithaca, which used to be Big Sanitarium. And I wonder how many sanitariums had something as directed as the pottery making. Did they all have something along those lines?
Not all of them, from what I understand, but some of them did. It was a popular practice at the time to learn some kind of thing like that. It wasn't necessarily all pottery, though. That's the
But
only
give them a
one I know
focus, in
of.
other words.
Hmm?
Give them a focus as to what they were supposed to
Yes.
be doing and interested in.
Right. And they believed that working with your hands was a healthy thing. It improved your health. So I don't know whether there was any research to back that up, but I think most of us feel better when we're staying somewhat busy anyway and not lying around in bed if we can help it.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Other questions about process, about the novel, about the research?
I just want to say one thing to Donna. Excuse me. Donna, you mentioned Mitch Carmichael in your book, and the teachers were totally against Mitch Carmichael. And I just wanted to let you know that he was defeated in the election, and he was beaten by a teacher.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's great news. Yes, I knew his name because the union leader brought him up numerous times. So I
Yes,
made sure to mention his name.
Mitch.
Yes, yes. Actually, there was a duel. Well, I won't go there.
It was good stuff.
Yeah, it was a popular phrase.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I sure do want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to me ramble on about my novel.
It was
It's good.
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delightful.
Really good.
Thank you
Delightful.
very much. So big air claps for Donna. And, so much, Donna. We really appreciate it. Appreciate the effort, the work, the research that went into this, and the juxtaposition of the worlds of these women. One of the things I appreciated was that that Angie's daughter doesn't get married. You know, she decides that this might not be the man for her, which is, you know, kind of like speaks to me of how far these women have come. So.
Her friend was one that didn't marry. The gallery owner. She has decided to follow in Susan B. Anthony's footsteps and stay single. And not a bad idea because it means she is able to keep that gallery. You know, it doesn't just become her husband's property. So,
Well, thank you so very much
thank you all.
for everybody who came tonight. You are welcome to stay on here and chat if you want. If you just, I know Carrie and Michael and I stayed on last week and just talked. So I know sometimes you don't get to see one another. So feel free to stay on here and chat if you like. I know the students are probably going to sign off and go do their homework.
All right.
And you can
And
just, yeah.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
nice to see you in person, Diane.
You too.
And I believe I see my sister-in-law, Nina, on there now. Hi, Nina.
Hi, Donna.
Bye.
Hi.
Hi.
Boom, boom, boom. Boy, the faces are jumping around so fast.
Yeah, you can stay on here and chat if you want. So feel free to do that.
All right.
Donna, it was great to see you.
Oh, good to see you too. Someday we're going to get to be together in person again and exchange hugs. I know it's going to happen.
Oh, I sincerely hope so.
Have you gotten your shot?
I had the first shot. And I get my second one on March 2nd.
I'm hoping for my second one
So,
Friday.
Donna, where do you keep all your books? Where do you keep all your books? Is your house full of books?
My house?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I give lots of them away, but we have bookshelves in every room and they're not like Phyllis Moore's that are all neat. I just have books everywhere. But I'm grateful for Kindle because it does keep the collection down a little bit more, that you can store hundreds and hundreds of them on one little device. So Nina, are you snowed in?
No, we only got here in Maryland, near DC, we got sort of ice, about an inch of ice or something, but nothing,
Oh, ice is worse than snow.
didn't stop the electricity or anything.
Hi, Myron.
Hey, Don, how you doing?
All right.
We enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks.
I know what a grind it is to do research.
I
And
like the research part.
well, the trouble is there's always one more archive to visit, one more museum, one more library, one more citation you got to track down. It never seems to end.
True.
Yeah, so Myron's middle name is Brownell,
Well, my research isn't Library of Congress quality.
just like Susan B. Anthony is Brownell, Susan Brownell Anthony. So he's trying to figure out if he's related.
I didn't quite catch all of that. The audio was a little weak.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is.
My middle name is Brownell, as is Susan B. Anthony's.
Oh, really?
Correct. I don't know if we're related or not.
Well, your mother might have chosen it for a reason.
Well, it's actually my father's, I believe, his maternal grandmother's surname. And that particular name actually is somewhat common in the New England area. And of course, a lot of New England spilled over into upstate New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, upstate New York. But I never researched it, but I've often been tempted to go through the genealogies to see if there's any connection at all. Ironically, where I used to work, a new staff member came on board, uh, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and his surname is Brownell. And I asked him if he was related to Susan B. And he thought that he was. He remembered doing some research, and he thought he found a connection, but I haven't done that research yet.
Well, that's a pretty cool connection. How cold is it there, Peg?
Well, it's supposed to go down in the teens tonight. And but last time I looked outside the house, it started snowing again. So we're supposed to get a few inches, maybe.
Peg, where do you live?
I live in Nutter Fort, which is right close to Clarksburg.
Yeah, I know. I'm friends with the Wyatts. And
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
I grew
Renee's
up
a
next
very
to
good
Chris
friend of
and
mine,
Phil
too.
and Alice.
And Phil.
yeah, and Alice, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know Amy Richards.
Yes.
Yeah.
My daughter used to do plays when she was young, and Amy had the playhouse.
Yeah, I teach with Amy.
And do you know Cindy Simons?
Oh
Straight.
yeah, really well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's old home week, right?
Yes, indeed.
And
Indeed.
Donna, I was going to ask you about teaching at Grafton. My dad taught at Grafton, but this would have been 70 to 74, maybe. His name was Gene Davis. He was a football coach.
Oh, I'm sure he was there when I was.
I'm good friends with Ken Godwin.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I talked to
He
him.
was a choir teacher.
Yeah, I talked to him
and
regularly.
did musicals that were fabulous.
Yeah. Well,
And
you know, my other field is theater. And my first musical was Finian's Rainbow at Grafton High School. I was in 6th grade. And my dad came home. You know, he was the football coach, but he appreciated music because his sister was a music teacher. And he came home and he said, "We're going to a musical." And my eyes must have gotten this big. You know, I was, because I had taken ballet, you know, as a kid and loved all that stuff. And I was just stunned that my dad was actually taking us to a musical. And Ken and I talked about Finian's Rainbow. I talked to him last week. He lives in Morgantown now, and talked about it and how you couldn't do that play now because that character says, "I wish you were black." And that was a bad thing. You know, you couldn't do that play anymore. But that was Ken and I are still really good friends. And we moved away from Grafton though when I was in the 9th grade. And so I didn't go to high school there.
Can't forget Ken.
Yeah, he's still a character.
And I think he was very good friends with the assistant principal at WI when I was there. And right now his name is escaping me. I can
Russ?
see. Hmm?
Was it Russ?
Rod sounds right.
Russ.
I can't place his name right now. It's too
I
many.
think I know who you're talking about. Because he ended up being the assistant principal at Robert C. Byrd later. I think we're talking about the same guy. Yeah.
Ah,
So yeah. Now, did you go to high school at WI?
I did.
Oh, so
And I taught there for 6 years. So,
okay.
and my brother was a student there when I taught there.
Oh wow.
I didn't have him in class, but
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
My brother was supposed to be in my first 3rd grade class, but
Oh.
I got rid of him.
I know teachers who've taught their own kids or a family member like that, but I think it would be rather strange.
I had my nieces, but I have a sister who's 10 years younger than I am. I could potentially have had her, but she went to the neighboring high school, so I didn't get her, which was good. And I had her friends.
Wouldn't it be awkward to give a relative a bad grade or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
try
I
to
had
get
her.
that right balance of treating them like everybody else, and then no matter what you do, you'd be accused of favoritism or being too hard or something.
Yes.
Well, I've even had my nephews in college.
Oh.
So I've had my nephew. In fact, I even got a phone call today from the newspaper. they were hiring my nephew, who's a journalist, and they called me and said, "Now he didn't put you down, but we wanted to talk to you." I said, "You didn't put me down, huh? I don't know what that is." So, but it was fun. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Donna. And
Night, all.
talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.